My name's Chad McKinney. I'm one of the directors of Revolve that decided to put this together. And welcome to the first year. We're glad you came. We were lucky enough, because we had a cancellation from Ryan, that we managed to get Patrick here. Patrick is a world-renowned ceramicist who happens to be from Skandia. And you now live in Florida, is that right?
Lakeland, Florida.
Lakeland, Florida. So we're super happy to have him, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day here, and it should be a blast. And I'll let you take it away.
Well, thanks for getting up on a Saturday morning. I just flew in the other night, and every opportunity I get to come back to Marquette, I take that. And sometimes I forget how cold it is and damp, because I've sort of wimped out in the last 8 years. I'm in Lakeland, Florida, teaching high school ceramics and sculpture. And I really like my job, and I like the kids. But it wasn't the plan. I was a full-time artist at a national level, at an international level for over 25 years. And, I got to travel to places like Japan and all the major cities within this continent, and Belize. And then in 2008 and 2009, when the economy crashed out a little bit, it affected everybody, including artists, a lot of us. I probably had about 10 or 15 galleries across the country that were, they would buy my work as soon as they could get it, and they would wait up to 2 years to get it, because they knew if they got it, they could put it on the shelf and it would sell, and I'd be happy and they'd be happy, and then they'd want more. So I had developed this tremendous market for my work, and that went on for a couple decades. So who would think it would change after a couple decades? I've got this worked out. I would go to an art show in Washington, D.C., and I would sell my work myself. And then I'd come home, and whatever I didn't sell, I would ship to a gallery, and then I'd make some more. So this went on for, like I said, a couple decades. It all changed just like that. Or that's how it seemed to me. It seemed as though someone just pulled the rug out from underneath me. I said, okay, well, I can get through this. I'll just work harder, and I'll work longer, and I'll do more shows. That was not the answer, because then it was a burnout factor. Working 7 days a week, 10, 12, 14 hours a day, it didn't make any difference. A lot of these galleries closed their doors, or they wouldn't buy outright. See, I never consigned any of my work. The gallery would have to buy the work, and they would get it for half price, but they'd have to buy 6 pieces, and at 30, so that was, that all worked out fine. So that all stopped, just like that. And then I would go to an art festival, like, Art on the Rocks, or, in a bigger city, of course. And instead of making X amount of dollars, I was making a third of that amount. And I'm thinking, well, this'll change. And then time marches on, and it's not changing. So I'm sitting up in my house over here on Bluff Street that I'm very proud of, because it was built in 1863 during the Civil War. So there's something about a house like that. But I'm, sitting in the house. It's the middle of winter. I've got 3 credit cards that are maxed out. Nobody's buying work. I said, it's time for a change. So I get on the phone. Long story short, I was able to find a position in Lakeland, Florida, teaching. And everything just fell into place for me. And, and it was one of the smartest things I've ever done. I really enjoy interacting with these children. You know, they're young adults. They think they're growing up. You know, they'll say to me, I'm 18 now, I'm growing up. So I've been doing that. This is my 8th year. It was a 5-year plan, and then I was going to come back to Marquette and restart my ceramic business. But, you know, if it works at all different levels, emotionally, financially, then why jump ship? So, you know, this is my 8th year. And every year I say, well, this will probably be my last year, and I'll come back to Marquette. I guess I'm supposed to talk into this a little bit. Here, we'll do that. Like I said, I come back here every opportunity I get because this is home. I have friends here, and my roots are here. So my roots are out in Skandia on a little hobby farm. And a hobby farm is a farm, as you probably already know, that doesn't really produce any income. It's just, it produces food for the family. You know. It was an interesting childhood in the fact that it seemed as though it was in another lifetime. You know, a wood-burning stove in the middle of the house. That was the heat. You know, there was an outhouse outside the kitchen. Eventually we got indoor plumbing. Okay, this is back in the early 50s now. So I'm a lot older than I look. Anyway, so it was a pretty tough childhood. And I'm not looking for any sympathy, I'm just sharing my life here with you. There was 8 of us children, 8 children. And the father was always in and out of VA hospitals. He was a Korean veteran that was 100% disabled, up here disabled. So he wasn't around very much. So I don't know why they kept having babies, but I guess it felt good or something, you know. So there was 8 of us, and then my mom, she was an orphan from Canada. So she went from foster home to foster home. So she had no real sense of family structure because she never really experienced that as a child herself. But she managed to keep the family together, and we had food on the table, a lot of venison, out of season, a lot of fish, a lot of berries, a lot of apples. You know, we learned to live off the land. So as a child, I always thought that I wanted to do something besides this. You know, this wasn't working too well. So anyway, I managed to get into the university here, and I got my degree in 1974 in photography, in black and white photography. Because it seemed like an easy way to get through school. You know, take some photographs and it was. But then after I got that degree, photography kind of left me flat. It didn't really challenge me in the way that I wanted to be challenged. You know, I was just sort of naturally kind of good at it for some reason. I could take a nice picture. And, you know, that was back in the days when we had film and we had chemicals and we had to develop it and, you know, burning in Dodger and apertures, and, you know, these days it's a little easier, I think. What happened was after I got my degree in '74, I wanted to use it. You know, I worked hard for this degree. You know, so I ended up in Florida teaching elementary art, K through 6. And I did that for almost 12 years. And that was an education in itself, of course, when you're dealing with, you know, 30 little ones at a time and you're trying to teach them something about art. But after 12 years, I was burnt out. And I made a promise to myself that I would not be another burnt out teacher because I was working with some. You know, I got to get my 30 years. I got to get my 30 years, and they're just so tired of it, you know. I said, no. After 12 years, I just quit. But during that 12 years, I started to develop my work in clay. And I slowly developed it to the point where people were buying it, and they liked it. And I was gaining more confidence, and I was getting into bigger and bigger shows. So I felt confident that I could quit that teaching job, although I heard some criticism from, you know, friends and in-laws and, you know, oh, you can't quit. And I said, yeah, I can. I just did. Anyway, so back in the 70s, early 80s, as a full-time educator in Florida, I think I was making $12,000 a year. So you weren't doing it for the money. Anyway, so when I quit that teaching position and started to travel around the United States to sell my work, I tripled my income the first year. So I was feeling pretty good, and it just kept going up from there. And one thing that I want to share with you today is, in the art world, or at least for me, one thing leads to another. For example, my work started to get better, and then I got into some of the bigger national shows like Coconut Grove in Miami. It was, you know, it was the show to be, and people would line up all day to buy your work, and they were there from all over the country. So one day, I'm at the Coconut Grove show, and I'm selling work, and I'm feeling confident, and this distinguished man walks up to my booth, and he picks up my business. No. He looks at me, but he doesn't have a piece, and he says, oh, nice work, da-da-da. So have you ever thought about having a story in Ceramics Monthly? And I looked him square in the eye, because I was, you know, feeling pretty confident, people buying. I said, well, only if I can be on the cover. If I can be the cover story. So I played my ace. And he sort of steps back like, who is this guy? You know. But sometimes you got to play your ace. So he picks up my card and he walks away. He doesn't say anything. So like a week later, I get a phone call from him or his secretary, I don't know, asking me to submit a story and some images of my work to be on the cover of Ceramics Monthly. So I was able to hire a professional writer. I didn't pay her, I just gave her work. And she wrote a beautiful story, and I had a professional potter shoot some images of my work. And then I sat back and waited, and lo and behold, like 3 months later, I'm on the cover of Ceramics Monthly. Well, that's like being on the cover of Sports Illustrated, you know, if you're an athlete. So, you know, this is 1993, so I'm feeling, man, I made it on the cover of Ceramics Monthly. It was great. So when I said one thing leads to another, then later on that year, maybe the next year, Michael Monroe, who is the curator for the Renwick in Washington, D.C., he sat down with Hillary. We all know who Hillary is. This is before there was all this bullshit in the air. And they decided that they were going to have the first American White House collection of crafts, or something, well, something like that. It's the White House collection of American crafts, the very first. For years, the White House had collected artwork, but it was always from other countries, which I don't understand that. But anyway, during the Clinton administration, well, Bill was there, Michael Monroe and Hillary put together the first collection of American crafts. So I get this letter in the mail, and at first I thought it was just some sort of political junk mail. I'm going through my bills, and I go, whoa, this is big. They asked me to be part of this collection. Out of 1 million potters, they asked, I don't know, I think there's maybe 6 or 8 potters in this collection. If you get a chance, you can look at this later, or you can go online and you can see it too. So I'm going, whoa, this is big. I get to be in the White House, a piece of my work in the White House. So I had about 3 months to make a piece. And of course, you don't want to think about that too much as you're making it, because then you start to overthink it. You know, you don't want to make it specially for them. You just want to do your thing. And so anyway, I made this beautiful piece for them. I was proud of it, and I was able to go to the opening at the White House and meet Bill and Hill and Michael. And I asked Michael Monroe, so why did you choose me? And he said, well, I saw your article in Ceramics Monthly. So that's how one thing leads to another. That's just one example. And I was impressed with the fact that you taught elementary school. And he used to teach elementary school. So things started to line up. Things sort of line up for you, for me as my career moved on. And that collection traveled around the United States for probably almost 10 years. It went to all the major museums in a lot of the major cities, in New York and San Francisco and Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I had opportunities to go to the openings. And everyone was quite different too. And I had opportunities to speak about that experience. So that was pretty cool. And it was a big feather in my cap, because then people start to collect your work because you're kind of well known then. But the strange thing about the arts is you can't really rely on your past successes. They come and go, you know. It seems like it was yesterday, but it seems like it was a long time ago too. You know, 93 was a long time ago. So nobody even really knows that much about it anymore. You know, you sort of let go. I mean, it's all right to talk about it and share it, but it isn't something that you hang on to and depend on it anymore. It all comes back to you and your work in time. So that's kind of part of the story of my career as it stands. It's been a wonderful journey from just starting out making functional things and gaining confidence and learning how to travel around around the whole United States. And then as time goes on, you realize that it's not about being in a magazine, it's not about being in a collection, it's not about how much money you make, it's about the work. And it's about how you feel about your work. Are you still feeling satisfied as a person? Are you fulfilled as an artist as you make your work? That's what it boils down to. And I can only speak for myself, of course, but that's basically what it boils down to. Are you still excited about getting in this studio every day? And I can say sincerely that after all these years, that's my favorite thing to do, is to get into my studio and work on a piece of work. It gives me a feeling of I'm doing something worthwhile. It has a purpose. It's something bigger than me. It's kind of like education too. The thing about being involved in education is it's not really about you anymore. It's about them. You're involved with something bigger than yourself. And a lot of artists, and I know lots of them all across the country, we're somewhat narcissistic in a healthy way, you know. And I can say that about myself, but then all of a sudden, it's not about you anymore, it's about them. So it's very rewarding to be involved with the arts and involved with something that's not about you and it's not about your work. Although you share it with them, but it's something bigger than you. But back to the studio and getting into my work. After 30 years plus of making pots and sculpture, I'm doing more sculpture, I still find this great satisfaction of making pieces. And these are 4 pieces that I just finished. These are like brand new pieces. because I haven't sold them yet. Nobody's seen them, and I'm really happy. I'm really happy with especially these two. So if you get a chance later, you know, you can come up and you can examine them closer. So I lost my train of thought there. I had an idea that I wanted to share. See, I had a little card here that I wrote something on. So I also have an artist information sheet that I only have a few here, but you're welcome to take one if you'd like. And there's something else here I wanted to share with you too. Okay, based on the title of my talk out there, I had a couple people tell me that it sounded sort of pompous, like I was like, they didn't like it. Well, I said, no, I don't think it's so pompous. It's what popped into my head. You know, it's, you know, how did this little skinny farm boy from Skandia evolve into this nationally recognized artist? So to sum it up, I think what happened for me is that I made a certain commitment, okay? And in order to really excel at any sort of art, whether it be music or dancing or visual art, you really do, or even sports for that matter, there's got to be a level of commitment that is basically off the charts. And of course, I can only speak for myself, but I see it, you know. And it's almost to the point where you could call it a bit obsessive. And we think of the word obsessive as being sort of a negative thing, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a negative thing. You can be obsessed about something in a positive way, as long as you have balance in your life and you feel centered. So I was totally committed and obsessive about my work, but that doesn't mean that I wouldn't find time to stop work, get out of my studio, and go in and cook dinner for my family every evening. That was kind of how I disengaged. I wanted to make sure they had a good meal. And we would sit down as a family and we would eat together. And then, so you have to find ways to have some balance in your life, but you still are totally committed to your work. And by that I mean, when it comes to nutrition, when it comes to sleep and exercise, in the back of my mind, you know, I might be out with my guy friends, and I might, you know, in my 20s, and we might be shooting pool or whatever. And it's like 10:30, 11 o'clock. Well, I have to get home and I have to go to bed because I need my sleep, because I need to work tomorrow. You know, these are not things that I would say to my friends, because that's not, you know, but these are things that were rolling in the back of my head. And I'm gonna eat nutritious food, and I'm not gonna drink too much beer because I don't want to be hung over tomorrow, because I need to work tomorrow, okay? So that's the kind of commitment. It's about, you know, your life revolves around your work. And of course it doesn't have to, but for me it did for many, many years. And I think if you want to take your work or your art to a certain level, you need that sort of commitment. Maybe some people don't, I did. And I wouldn't have it any other way. And that commitment still exists today, okay? It's sort of a lifelong commitment towards the arts. And it's sort of, and that doesn't mean that you can't have fun, you know. I would play tennis in the evenings, and I would take my little girls for a walk around the block on Sunday morning and make them pancakes and, you know, but it all revolved around you as an artist and your work. And a little story that I'll share with you that brings a smile to my face is if you look closely at my pieces, you're going to see this sort of this sort of abstract pattern that has nothing to do with the images. They're like these little lines that sort of, and these little dots and things. And you'll see it on all my work if you look closely. And the way that I discovered this was on Sunday mornings, I would always make a big breakfast for my 3 girls and my wife at the time. And I'd make pancakes and bacon and scrambled, you know, the whole thing. So we would have Sunday morning breakfast, and then I'd go out to the studio and I'd work for a couple hours, you know, maybe pack an order up to go to a gallery or whatever. And then one Sunday morning, I came in, and the girls were supposed to do the dishes, but they were all upstairs playing. They were all upstairs playing. I could hear they were having fun, and so I didn't make a big deal about it. I'll just do them. It'll take me 10 minutes. Not a big deal. So I'm standing in the kitchen, and I have a plate in my hand, and it has a paper towel on it. And it was the plate that I used to block the bacon. And the grease had sopped through the paper towel, and it was cold in the house. It was up at the Bluff Street house. It was like 60, 62. It's hard to get that old house warm. And I pulled that paper towel off there, and the light from the kitchen window hit the pattern of the bacon grease. And it was beautiful. I'm going, oh, look at that. It left this pattern of bacon grease from the paper towel. And all of a sudden, I said, you know, if I can do that with bacon grease, I can do it with terra sigillata, which is a very refined slip. So I went out to this studio, and I took some paper towels and this very refined slip. It's the finest particles of clay suspended in water. And I started painting through the paper towels onto some pieces that were greenware. And I was able to come up with this way of transporting or transferring the clay onto the clay through the paper towel. And that's become part of my trademark. It's in all my pieces. So if my girls would have done the dishes, or if I would have went upstairs and said, you get your little butts down here and clean those dishes, I would have never discovered this. So, you know, you have to pay attention to your bacon grease, and don't be afraid to do the dishes if your girls are upstairs playing. You know, so that's another example of one thing leads to another. And in order to be creative, and that's what we are as artists, it's our responsibility to be creative. In order to be creative, it isn't something that you punch into a clock or, well, I'm going to go out to the studio now and I'm going to be creative. That's not how it works. You think in creative ways all the time. It's something that you turn on, and it doesn't really turn off that way. And I share this with my students in school. We can be creative in the way we dress, and they are these days, you know. And we can be creative in the way that we interact with each other, and the way that we do our hair and our makeup. So then they start to get it. Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. So as adults, sometimes we forget it's all right to be creative in everything we do, in the way we cook, in the way we interact with people. But it's best if you don't expect to be able to shut that off and on, because that's not really the way it works, for me anyway. It isn't like, well, today I'm going to be creative and tomorrow I'm just going to be a slug. I often compare it to like the spigot on the side of a house. If you turn that spigot off and you don't turn it on for a couple years, because this has happened to me, and you go back and you go to turn it on, it's seized up, okay? You got to keep that spigot, you got to move that spigot, let it drip once in a while. You don't have to have it on all the time, but let the water flow. The same way with creativity. It's something that is yours forever, your whole life. And creativity is the way to find happiness in whatever you do. And sometimes I'll talk to people that they might be a brain surgeon, they might be a banker, they might be a teacher, we have to deal with repetition in our lives. And repetition can be repetitious. And repetitious is kind of boring. So if you can find ways to deal with repetition in your life, no matter if you are a brain surgeon or a banker or a teacher or an artist, finding ways to deal with repetition allows you to keep your creative juices flowing and find happiness in your work. Even if it's just a little bit every day or every once in a while, if you can find ways to be creative in what you do, you're going to find joy within what you're doing. And if you can't think in those terms or choose not to think in those terms, it becomes repetitious, and then your work starts, your art will start to look repetitious. It's been done over and over and over again, and although it sort of looks the same as the artwork you were doing 10 years ago, it's not the same. It doesn't have the same energy, okay? So that's something to think about no matter what you do. And I'm not sure if you guys are artists, or maybe you're brain surgeons or bankers, I'm not sure. But dealing with repetition in a creative way will bring joy to you, okay? If at any time you think of something that you want to ask or say to me, don't hesitate, all right? So anyway, I'm planning to come back to Marquette someday, I think. Although when I got off that plane the other day, I'm going, man, do I want to come back here? It's cold here. You know, I turned into a wimp. You know, your blood just thins out, I guess. And it's a mindset, too. You know, you get used to it. And I, was born and raised in this stuff. That little farmhouse out in Skandia had that little wood stove in the middle of the living room downstairs. And it had the windows were one little thin pane of glass, and sometimes the caulking wasn't that good, I guess. And we were upstairs. There was 2 bedrooms upstairs, so there was 4 boys in this bedroom and 4 girls in this bedroom. So it kind of worked out. We all had our own corner. But in the middle of the winter, that wind would blow from the north, and it would come across these fields, and it would hit that window upstairs. And I can remember waking up and seeing a little snowdrift across the bedroom floor. The wind would blow so hard through that window. So you know it wasn't very warm in there because it wasn't melting. So it was an interesting childhood. But you know what they say? What doesn't kill you builds character, or something like that. I'm not really sure. Yeah, that makes you stronger. Yes. Got involved because here in Marquette they have a artist group, I think, that meet every month. And the same thing in Lakeland. We have groups of artists. I've always been sort of selfish with my time in that regard, not getting involved with groups. And that's sort of my shortcoming, but I'll be honest with you, I mean, sometimes I would go to a meeting just to see what they're like, and they left me flat without getting, you know, it was, I don't have time for this. I had other things to do, you know, which sounds kind of shallow on my part, but, you know, I like to give back to the community, but I don't like to be too involved with artist groups. Next month, well, actually, in March, I was asked to speak to a group in Lakeland. There's an artist group there, and of course, they had seen my work at some national shows, and they asked me to come and talk to them, just like I'm talking to you, and I said, sure, that's fine, yeah. You know, so I like to give at a certain level, but yes.
I think it's helpful when you're starting out, like,
Yeah.
I'm kind of like
Yeah.
behind with tech, and I live in the Lansing area. And,
Yeah.
Librarian started, you know, they have business network connection that meets once a month.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, we really need this for makers.
Yeah.
And artists that
Yeah.
are, you know, trying to take that step.
Right, because there's strength in numbers, and we can all take and learn from each other. I think it's a good thing. I'm not knocking it. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's very helpful. Yeah, you know, just for me on that.
But once you get going,
Once you get going,
then you're too busy.
Yeah.
And that's okay too.
you kind of
Do
become,
what you do, give
yeah,
back in
you
another
know,
way.
you just kind of be more selfish, I think. With your, well, maybe it's not selfish. I'm not really sure. Yeah.
You're at another level.
Yeah.
Not to sound
Yeah.
snobbish,
Yeah.
but you have another way of
Yeah.
contributing
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
artists that are developing.
Yeah, I have tried to keep my ego in check, and maybe sometimes it, you know, doesn't seem like it is, but it really is. You know, because I'll go to an art show and other potters go, you're, you know, they want to praise you and you're this and this. I go, you know, just another dude working with clay, trying to make a living, and you know. And I share everything as far as technique, because, you know, in the ceramic world, traditionally, there's always been a lot of secrets, like, you know, the Chinese kept the porcelain secret from the English, and the English kept this glaze from these, you know. There was these secrets that traveled around the world, and some potters still hang on to that sort of mindset, but I share everything. Okay, and I get potters all the time into my booth. Well, how do you do this? And what are you doing here? And I tell them everything. And if they want to copy my work, that's fine. More power to you. I hope you can do it, you know. But by sharing techniques, it has nothing to do with the final outcome, you know, because it's who you are as a person, and it's your mark making that will start to show through. And I like to call it surety of line. If you have a brush or a pencil and you do this, and you've done this 1,000 times, you have surety of line. So if you're just making it, if you're just starting out and you've only been working for a couple of years, more than likely you don't have surety of line yet. But you know, some people do. They have the gift. So anyway, there's a couple more things I would share with you. Let me see what our time is here. Oh yeah, we're doing pretty good. I got a couple more minutes. Are there any more questions about anything? Yes, sir.
Yeah, you mentioned commitment and obsession, but also with balance.
Yeah.
And you had started a lot of your creativity with your teaching training.
Yes.
I was a teacher for about 3 years off and on, taught music. But I also try to make music in my spare time too.
Yeah.
And part of the balance that I had was teaching, having a small child, and also trying to find that time for creativity. Could you speak a little bit about how you were able to manage your time between, like, let's say, lesson plans and family creativity?
Well, That's an excellent question. First of all, I would throw the lesson plans out the window because they take time. And if you're a beginning teacher, I think it's important to do lesson plans. So, don't get me wrong, but I sort of deal with that now, and these principals come into my room and say, well, can I see your lesson plans? I go, well, my lesson plans are right here, from the hip, the heart, and here. I don't have it on paper. I don't need lesson plans, not to sound full of myself, but I've been doing this long enough. I don't need to convince you that I know how to teach. Come into my room and sit here for a while. And then after I told them that, they leave me alone. Yeah, but if you're a beginning teacher, it is important. And to find that balance, you really have to have some structure with your time. And when it comes to your own music or your own work, you don't have to be in there for 3 hours, 5 hours, or 8 hours. Even if, when I was learning to throw, even if it was only for 20 or 30 minutes a day, it's that muscle memory, the same with music, of course, and everything else. It's that muscle memory. So to just find a little window of time is important, and that's kind of what I did. Is when I was teaching elementary school, I had to be there in the morning, and I would see 150 kids a day. Mr. Dragon, and they would all take a little piece of you, and they deserved a little piece of you. And if your name is Mr. Dragon, they've got to say it at least 3 times just to hear them say it, which is all right too. But at the end of the day, you're like, oh man. But, you take a deep breath, and I would stay after school, and I would work for an hour or so when the kids were gone, and that way I was able to develop my work. Which brings up another point. I think it's really important for artists at all levels or whatever medium is to develop your work before you start to try and show it or sell it. Well, you can show it at any point and you can sell it at any point, but I've seen so many young people get into the visual arts and they're so eager to get out there and show it and you start making a living, and then it doesn't work. Your uncle and your mom and dad and everybody tell you how great you are, but then you go out there in the real world and nobody wants to buy it. Well, you're not ready yet. You've got to, I think I waited like 10 years before I started to show my work, maybe longer. It's got to be ready, and you'll know when it's ready. You'll know in your heart and your mind, and when people start handing you money, then you really know it's ready. And it's not just about money, but people, you'll have that confidence because, like I was saying earlier, one thing will lead to another. One positive thing will lead to another. And I feel so blessed in many ways because that was sort of my life with my work. And I'm not like this, I'm not an atheist, but I'm not really like heavy into the religion scene either. I don't know what I am, but I think I've always believed that there was some sort of power up there that's taken care of me and has brought me to the next place. Just like this teaching job. It's like, okay, I have to do something because I'm out of money and my credit cards are maxed out. So I open a book and I look at the state of Florida and I go, well, I don't want to go to a big city, but I don't want too small. So, Lakeland, right in the middle of the state. It's kind of a medium-sized city. Okay, Lakeland. Okay, so I get on the phone and I do a little research, and I go right to the top of the pyramid. Who's in charge of the arts in Polk County schools? I go right to the top. And I get her on the phone. And I tell her my story, because we all have a story. I tell her my story, and it's a good story. And the whole time, that she's talking to me on the phone, she's on the computer. Patrick Dagan, blah, 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 and all this stuff starts popping up, okay? And I said, well, you know, I'm going to be in Florida to do the Winter Park show in about 3 months. Is it all right if I stop by your office and, you know, we can talk more? And she says, sure. So I walk into her office, and I got a pot here and a pot here, and I got a resume, and I give her the resume, and I put the pots down, and we talk for 20 minutes, and she says, you know, I got a place for you. First phone call, first interview, you know, it's like, and that's what I was talking about earlier. There's like some sort of force up there, you can call it what you want, I'm not sure what it is, that has always sort of led me in the right direction, and so I've been blessed like that. Oh, I had another thought too. So anyway, I felt very fortunate to get this teaching job, but I wasn't sure it was really what I wanted to do. You know, because you hear the stories, oh my God, education, it's a mess out there. Not all across the board, but this has changed education as we know it. And it's changed the world as we know it. But in the classroom, as teachers and educators, we're still trying to figure out how to deal with this, okay? Because the snowball's down the hill, there's no turning it back. But part of my success at this particular school in my program is this generation that I'm teaching, you know, they came out of the womb with this in their hand practically. This is just part of the world that we created for them. This is what they know. But if you can provide them with an experience that has nothing to do with this, they're a clean slate, you know, when I get them. It has nothing to do with this phone. It could, but in my case, it doesn't. And you can provide them with an experience that they have an object in their hand that they made and they're proud of it and they can hold it. This is real. There's a big wow factor there. And then you got them. You got them hooked. Because look at what I did. Look, yeah. And they can take that home and they can put it on their dresser and give it to their grandma or their mom or whatever. And now they're ready to do something else. And I designed my lessons so each project will build on the next. They become more and more difficult, more and more challenging. And by the end of the year, these kids are just amazing what I could get out, you know, what I'm able to get out of them. And not all of them, maybe 80%, which is good, or maybe 90%. So, you know, there's some real satisfaction in seeing the growth, because some of these kids I'll have for 3 years, the ceramics 1, 2, and 3. And it's just amazing. They discover that there's another world, there's a whole nother world out there besides technology where you're just doing this and this. That, you know, you're making decisions and you're pinching and you're glazing and you're making decisions. A lot of young people, they don't have to make decisions except what button to press. But in ceramics, they got to make decisions. What color do I use? What kind of knob do I want on this box? You know, it's about learning how to make decisions, which sounds, it's very difficult for this younger generation to learn how to make decisions. So that's very rewarding for me, is to see the growth of these guys. Yeah. Are there any more questions or comments or anything like that? Yeah. So anyway, we have a few more minutes. What I would like to do is you guys can come up here and actually handle these pieces. Clay is meant to be touched, and you can ask questions about what's going on the surface. Like this piece, for example, I just finished this piece, and I was just talking to this gentleman here, and this pot, I'm really excited about it because it's not really pretty. I mean, it's not ugly either, but it's just sort of gray, and it has like some mountains and some clouds on it, and it's kind of, it doesn't match the sofa or the carpet or anything, but it sort of tells a story. When you look at it, you see these little figures, and they appear to be like male figures, and I call it the hunters because there's like little groups of guys that are running through the woods, and they all have clubs or sticks or spears or something. And it has this sort of primitive feel to it. And you can kind of see what I was talking about, with the bacon grease painting through, so you can see examples of that. So part of my success as an artist is that whole creativity thing. If you can find a way to make your work stand out from everybody else's, then half the battle's won because you're doing something different. And it's hard to come up with something new, because it's all been done before. But you can find different ways to approach it. There's a lot of these pieces are pit fired in sawdust, okay? It's kind of like a Sager firing. It's a kind of a primitive firing, but I will fire them in an electric kiln, first of all, a couple times to get the strength of the material and to glaze the interiors. Every interior has a different pattern going on. So there's a lot of experimenting with glaze tests, glaze tests, glaze tests. I might do 100 glaze tests before I discover something that I love and need to remember. So I learned the hard way. You got to write everything down, even if it's shorthand. Because I'll do these glaze tests, different glazes on top of each other, blah, 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 blah. And, I'll remember. And then the next day you pull it out and go, wow, this is wonderful. How in the hell did I do that? So, you got to write things down, or at least I do, because there's too many things going on throughout the day. So it's easy to forget. So I developed a way to paint and draw with clay on clay. So you can liquefy clays to different consistencies. Some of them are like thick like peanut butter, and I'll use a palette knife to do the mountains. And then some of them are very refined, and I'll pass it through a tiny stainless steel tip. Allows me to draw with it. It's called slip trailing. And a lot of it's brush work. And you can influence the color of the clay with different oxides and different materials without getting too technical. But so when I throw my pots, and I throw these on a wheel, and then I trim them and I burnish them, and I always cut the tops so they're undulating. Because to me that gives them a little bit of movement, and it's more like a landscape if it's like this instead of having it straight. So as you can see, they're all kind of like this. So when I throw my pots, I'm stretching my canvas. That's kind of how I think of that. And actually, a lady came into my booth many years ago in Ann Arbor when I used to do that show. And she was blind, and she came in, and I'm helping her, and she's touching the pots, and she's asking me about it, and I'm explaining what I do and how I do it. And she said, "Oh, so when you throw your pot, you're stretching your canvas." And I said, "Yeah, thanks for sharing that." So I've always hung on to that. That was her. Yeah. So, and that's kind of what I'm doing. And that's why I work in a very simple form. These are very simple bowl forms with a nice contour from top to bottom. I could throw pieces that do this, and they got lids, and they got this and this. But I've rested on the bowl form because of that reason. I think of it more as a three-dimensional canvas, and it allows me to explore this interior surface. So this interior space in relation to what's happening here is just as important. It kind of gives you the sense of volume, and it kind of gives your eye another place to go. Instead of just looking here, you discover the interior space. There's this relationship between this space and this surface, and that excites me as an artist, and sometimes it excites people too, and they want to, take it home. So it's exciting when someone walks into your booth. I just did a show in Kansas City, and in my opinion, it's one of the top outdoor festivals in the country. When they say there's 250,000 people come to this show in 2.5 days, there's no exaggeration. And people come out and they're excited. They got their Sunday best on and they got their margarita or whatever, and they're enjoying the arts. Kansas City people in general, they just embrace the arts. And even if they don't buy anything, when they come into your booth and they're excited about what you're doing and you engage them, that's part of the excitement for me. And just recently, I was in Kansas City, and it just happened to rain that weekend, which is another story, but so, sales were a little slow. And this couple came into my booth. They were a handsome couple, and they told me their story. They had traveled around the world pretty much and collected art from all different parts of the world. And they were on their way from one country to the next, I can't remember exactly, and they had all their stuff in a big crate. Well, that crate got washed overboard. They lost all of their art collection from all over the world and all their memories. It was gone. But they were cool. They got over it. Anyway, they bought a large piece of my work, and they were starting over with their collection. And I was like the first piece that they decided to buy to start their collection again. So I felt honored because these guys, they were well-traveled, and I think they got a lot of insurance money too, but I didn't ask them about that. But anyway, it was kind of a sad story when they told it. Yeah. So, any more questions? Any more comments? Well, anyway, it's been fun, and I hope I was able to share something with you and you could learn something about me and my life, and perhaps you can incorporate it into yours as an artist. I'm not sure, but that's the whole idea, is to share. And if you'd like to come up and look at these closer, and if you have any questions, and if you'd like to see the White House collection, you can see my piece on page, I don't know what page it is, 82. Okay? Thank you very much for having me. It was fun. This clay